You've got a little something right there. Do I really? I can't see it. She looks so pretty in the pink dress. Yes, and this one is wearing the shoes I made. Is it true that we are going to see the ocean this summer?
She didn't come to Texas looking for love. She came because she had nowhere else to go. Clara Whitfield stepped off the train at Dusty Creek Station with one worn leather bag, a 7-year-old girl gripping her hand, and a letter she had read so many times the paper had gone soft at the folds. The letter was from a man she had never met, a man named Eli Holt, a rancher, a widower, a stranger who had agreed, through a marriage broker in St. Louis, to give her his name in exchange for help running his household and raising his daughter. It wasn't love. She knew that. It was survival dressed up in legal ink. But survival was something Clara understood. She had been surviving her whole life. Surviving a father who drank away every soft thing in their home. Surviving a first marriage to a man who smiled at her in church and turned cold the moment the vows were done. Surviving his death, which left her with nothing but debt, a little girl named Rosie, and a reputation in their small Missouri town that whispered behind her back wherever she walked. She had tried to stay. She had tried to rebuild. But some towns decide who you are, and they never let you be anything else. So when the broker's letter came, offering a fresh start in Texas, she said yes before she finished reading it. Now she stood on a dusty platform in the middle of nowhere, the sun pressing down on her like a hand on her shoulder, and she wondered if she had made the worst decision of her life. If you've ever had to start over when you had nothing left, this story is for you. Stay with it, because this one is going to matter. A man was leaning against a post at the far end of the platform, tall, broad-shouldered, his hat pulled low enough that she couldn't read his face until he pushed off the post and walked toward her, slow and unhurried, like a man who had learned that most things in life couldn't be rushed. He stopped a few feet away and looked at her, then down at Rosie, then back at her. Mrs. Whitfield? His voice was low, quiet, not unkind. Miss, she corrected softly. The broker said you knew I was a widow. He nodded once. I did. I just wasn't sure you'd come. I said I would. Something moved through his eyes. Something that wasn't quite surprise but was close to it. Like he wasn't used to people doing what they said. Eli Holt, he said, and he didn't offer his hand. He just picked up her bag from the ground like it was the most natural thing in the world and turned toward a wagon at the edge of the road. Rosie looked up at Clara. Is that him? Yes. He's quiet. I know. Papa was loud. Clara squeezed her daughter's hand. Come on, sweetheart. The ride to the ranch took nearly an hour. Eli didn't talk much. He answered her questions about the property, the work, the schedule. He told her his daughter's name was June, that she was 8 years old, that she hadn't spoken much since her mother passed 2 years ago. He said it plainly, without performance, and Clara could hear the grief underneath the plainness, like a stone at the bottom of a clear river. The ranch was called Holt's Crossing. It sat on a wide stretch of land beneath a sky so enormous it made Clara feel both very small and strangely free. The house was big but worn, the way a house gets when there's no woman in it. Not dirty, just tired. Like it had forgotten how to be a home. A small girl stood on the porch when they pulled up. Dark hair, serious eyes, a rag doll hanging from one hand. Rosie climbed down from the wagon before it fully stopped and walked right up to her. I'm Rosie. I'm 7. My mama cries sometimes, but she doesn't want me to see. Clara closed her eyes. The little girl on the porch looked at Rosie for a long moment. Then she held out the rag doll. Her name is May, she said. She likes company. Eli watched his daughter hand over that doll, and something in his face shifted. Clara caught it only because she was watching. A softening so brief it was almost nothing. But it was something. They married 3 days later. A judge came out from town. There were no flowers, no guests, no music. Rosie sat in a chair holding June's hand. The judge read the words. Eli said yes. Clara said yes. They signed the paper. And that was that. He gave her the larger bedroom. She refused it. They settled on her taking the smaller room down the hall, and neither of them mentioned it again. The first weeks were careful and quiet. Clara cooked, cleaned, organized the house back into something that breathed. She planted a small kitchen garden. She helped Rosie with her letters and pulled June into the lessons too, gently, never forcing. June resisted at first, then didn't. She started eating dinner at the table instead of her room. She started leaving May on the chair instead of clutching her all day. Eli watched all of this without comment, but he noticed. Clara could tell he noticed. He started leaving wildflowers on the kitchen table. Not arranged, just dropped there, like he hadn't decided to leave them, he just had. He fixed the window latch she had mentioned was sticking. He came in from the fields one evening and found her crying over a burned pot of stew, and he didn't say anything embarrassing. He just quietly made her a plate of bread and cold meat and set it next to her without a word. It wasn't romance, not yet, but it was kindness. Real kindness. The kind she hadn't felt in so long she almost didn't recognize it. Then his brother came. Wade Holt arrived on a Thursday with a bottle of whiskey and a wide smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was younger than Eli by 4 years and looked like him the way a copy looks like an original. Almost right, but something slightly off. He had Eli's height, but not his stillness. He had Eli's jawline, but not his steadiness. He talked a lot, laughed at his own jokes, and watched Clara in a way that made the back of her neck prickle. Eli seemed to tighten when Wade was around. Not visibly, but Clara noticed it. The way he kept his answers short, the way he stayed near. Wade stayed 3 days. On the second night, after Eli had gone to bed, Wade came into the kitchen where Clara was finishing the dishes. "He's not what you think, you know," Wade said, leaning against the doorframe. Clara kept washing. "I don't know what you mean." "Eli. He's not the good man everyone around here makes him out to be." He paused. "Ask him about the mortgage. Ask him why my name isn't on the deed even though I work this land too. Ask him what really happened to my share." Clara set down the pot. "Whatever is between you and your brother is between you and your brother." Wade smiled. "Sure, but you should know who you married." He left the next morning, and he left something behind. A seed. Small and dark, planted in the space between Clara and the truth. She didn't want to believe it. She told herself she wouldn't. But it sat there, that seed, through a week of quiet dinners and soft evenings, and then she made a mistake. She went looking. She didn't mean to snoop. She was cleaning the study, reorganizing papers that had been piled in disorder for what looked like years, and she found a letter. A legal letter. From a bank. About a loan taken out against the ranch, a loan large enough to make her breath stop, and beside it, a second document with Wade Holt's signature at the bottom, notarized and dated 2 years ago. She didn't understand all the legal language, but she understood enough to know that Wade had signed something related to this land, and that Eli had never mentioned it. She confronted him that evening. It came out wrong. She hadn't meant it to come out as an accusation, but fear has a way of making accusations out of questions. "Why does Wade's name appear on a bank document about this ranch?" she asked, setting the paper on the table between them. Eli looked at it. Something went flat in his eyes. "Where did you find that?" "I was cleaning the study." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "That's not something you needed to go through." "I wasn't going through your things, I was cleaning." "Clara." "Eli, tell me what it means." "Wade said things. And now I find this and I don't know what to think." And there it was. His face changed. Not with anger, but with something worse. Hurt. And then the shutting down that men do when hurt becomes something they can't afford to show. "Wade said things," he repeated slowly. "And you believed them." "I didn't say that. I said I found a document and I want to understand." "You went looking." "I wasn't looking, I was cleaning." But he had already stepped back, not physically, but in the way that mattered. The warmth that had been slowly building between them, those quiet evenings, those unspoken kindnesses, the wildflowers, the bread and cold meat, all of it seemed to go very still, like a pond after a stone. "The document is nothing corrupt," he said, his voice flat and careful. Wade borrowed against the land 4 years ago without my knowledge. I found out after he'd already done it. I've spent 2 years paying it back. That's what that paper is. That's the whole story." He picked up his hat. "I'm not a man who lies, Clara. I thought that might have been clear by now." He walked out. And Clara sat alone at the kitchen table with the document in her hands and the terrible feeling of having broken something she hadn't even known she was holding. The next days were polite and cold in the way that is worse than fighting. He was not cruel. He was not unkind. He was just gone from her, present in the house but somewhere far away behind his eyes, and she felt the absence of him like a draft under a door. June noticed. Children always notice. She came to Clara's room one evening and sat on the edge of the bed. "Did you and Papa have a fight?" "We had a disagreement," Clara said carefully. "Mama and Papa used to fight," June said. "But then Papa would bring her coffee in the morning even when he was still mad. He always said sorry with his hands before he said it with his mouth." Clara looked at this little girl who had given her rag doll to a stranger on a porch, and her chest ached. "He sounds like a good man," Clara said. "He is," June said simply. "He just doesn't know how to say it." Clara reached out and smoothed the hair back from June's face. "Neither do I," she admitted. The breaking open came 3 days later. The storm rolled in fast from the north, the kind of Texas storm that comes in like it owns the land and doesn't apologize. By the time the rain started, Eli was out trying to get the horses into the barn. Clara could see him through the kitchen window, struggling against the wind with 2 spooked animals and a barn door that kept slamming back against him. She didn't think. She pulled on her coat and went out into the rain. She grabbed the barn door and held it open, leaning all her weight against it while he got the horses through. Rain soaked her through in seconds. The wind was pulling at her and she dug her boots into the mud and held on. When the last horse was in and he turned and saw her standing there, drenched, hair plastered to her face, holding that door with both hands, something shifted in Eli Holt that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with the part of a person that is deeper than hurt feelings and pride. He reached out and covered her hands with his. He didn't say anything. They stood there in the rain for a moment that was longer than a moment, and then he said, quietly, "Come inside." They sat at the kitchen table with towels over their shoulders and cups of hot coffee between their hands, and then he told her about Wade. All of it. How Wade had been jealous of the ranch since they were boys. How he had borrowed against the land and then disappeared when the debt came due. How the loan had nearly cost Eli everything. How he had worked twice as hard for 2 years to pull it back, and how he had finally managed to protect what his father had left him. He told her about the marriage broker, that it hadn't just been convenience, that June needed someone, and he was running out of time and strength, and he hadn't known what else to do. He told her all of it in the flat, careful voice of a man who is not used to telling anyone anything. And then he said, "I should have told you about the document. You had a right to know what you married into." "I should have asked instead of accusing," she said. "You weren't wrong to wonder. You weren't wrong to be hurt." They looked at each other across the table. Outside, the storm was starting to quiet. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "I don't know how to have someone in this house and let them actually be in it. My wife before, we were kind to each other, but we weren't close. I don't know that I ever learned how to be close to someone." "I don't either," Clara said honestly. "The men in my life have mostly made me feel smaller. You're the first one who ever just picked up my bag." He was quiet for a moment. "That's a low bar," he said. And despite everything, she laughed. A real laugh, short and surprised, and he looked at her like he was storing it somewhere. 2 weeks later, Wade came back. He came with a lawyer and a claim that the original deed had a shared title provision that had never been properly dissolved, and that he was owed half the ranch. He came with paperwork and a story about being cheated by his own brother, and he went to the neighbors with it, and to the bank, and he made enough noise that people started whispering in town. Eli was calm. He had been expecting this, Clara realized. He had known Wade would come back eventually. He had the original deed. He had the records. He had every payment receipt from 2 years of pulling the land back from the debt his brother had buried it in. But the process took time. And in that time, things were uncertain. People in town were cool to them when they came in for supplies. The banker asked uncomfortable questions. There was a week when Clara didn't know if they would keep the ranch or lose it. She stayed. She didn't pack her bag. She didn't send a letter to the broker asking about other placements. She helped Eli organize the documents. She sat with him at the table at night going through papers. She kept the house steady and the girls calm, and when Eli looked at her across the kitchen one evening and said, "You're still here," she said simply, "I'm still here." The lawyer settled it in Eli's favor. Wade's claim had no legal standing. The deed was clear. The debt was repaid. The ranch was Eli's, and Eli's alone. Wade left again. This time, Clara thought, for good. Or at least for a long time. The evening after the settlement came through, Eli found her in the garden. The sun was going down over the wide Texas land, painting everything gold and quiet. He stood beside her without talking for a while. That was something she had come to understand about him. He let things breathe before he said them. "I'd like to change the terms," he said finally. She looked at him. "The marriage contract," he said. "I'd like to change the terms." Her heart moved in a way she hadn't expected. "What terms?" she asked carefully. He turned to look at her. His face was open in a way she hadn't seen before, not unguarded exactly, just honest. "I'd like it to be a real marriage," he said. "If you want that. I'm not going to pretend I know how to do it well, but I'd like to try. With you." Clara looked out over the land, the garden she had planted, the house behind them with the lamp lit in the window. Somewhere inside, she could hear Rosie and June laughing at something, that pure, easy sound of two little girls who had found each other. She thought about the woman who had stepped off a train with one bag and nothing left. She thought about how survival had looked like enough back then. She thought about how she had stopped believing in anything more than that. "I don't need promises," she said finally. "I just need true." "I can do true," he said. She nodded. "Then yes." He reached out and took her hand. Not dramatically, not with a speech, just took her hand in the evening light and held it, the way people do when words had been used up and something quieter says the rest. A month later, on a Sunday morning, June came down to breakfast and sat next to Rosie and started eating her eggs. And then she looked up at Clara and said, casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world, "Can I call you Mama?" Clara set down her coffee cup. Eli went very still across the table. Rosie looked between them both. Clara looked at June, this small, serious girl with her father's eyes and her mother's doll still sitting on a chair in the corner, and she felt something in her chest open up like a room that had been locked for a very long time. "Yes," she said softly. "You can call me Mama." June went back to her eggs. Rosie reached over and patted June's arm like a tiny old woman. "I told you she'd say yes." Eli looked at Clara across the table. There was something in his eyes that she didn't have a name for yet, but she thought she would spend a long time learning it. It wasn't a perfect life. The ranch still had hard years and easy ones. Clara still burned things sometimes. Eli was still quiet when he should have talked, and talked too plainly when softness was needed. The girls argued and made up and drove them both halfway to the edge. But every morning, there was coffee on the table when Clara came downstairs. Eli had started making it. He never mentioned it. He just made it. And every evening, the lamp in the window was lit. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. If this story touched something in you today, I would love to know. Leave a comment below and tell me what part stayed with you the most. And if you're watching this from somewhere far away, tell me where you're from. It always means so much to know who's listening. If stories like this one bring you comfort, subscribe so you never miss one. There's always another one coming, and I save the best ones for the people who stay.